Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to share some thoughts and theories I have about what's next for Spider-Man in the MCU, whether it's just the next movie or the next potential trilogy. You know, just the fun, thoughts and, like I said, theories about, where things could head from here. Do know that this will involve spoilers from No Way Home, so if you have not seen No Way Home, do not watch this. The Venom situation. Obviously, we're not getting full-blown Tom Hardy Venom. Once again, feel however you want to about that. I like that version of Venom. I know that wasn't for everyone. I know not everyone liked those movies. I still have not seen the second one at the time of me recording this, so I will include that as well. But, it seems like we worked around like, okay, so there's a piece of Venom left in this world. Now, that's definitely going to be interesting considering the fact is that Venom isn't a bad guy in his own universe. He plays the role of an anti-hero. Still more of a hero, right? So what does this mean about this piece of Venom that's here? Like, is this one going to be like a bad guy? Like, because we can still end up getting our black suit Spider-Man storyline, but the question is like, especially because if this symbiote was a part of Venom, that means it has its knowledge of being like, oh, like Spider-Man, I'm interested in Spider-Man, I find you fascinating. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe it first fuses with him because it's like, oh, like I'm remembering from back when I was a part of Venom and I want to, become a part of you. And then after, like, it changes him, like it does typically in the black suit storyline, he gets pissed and wants to like get away from it, but now it's like Venom's like, no, I'm obsessed with you, I love being with you, because the difference is like he gave Eddie all his powers. Now with Peter it's like, oh, I'm even stronger because you already got powers and then I'm adding me on top of it. So it's like, right, I want to be back with you again. So then becomes a question of like, right, so is the MCU going to do like an Eddie Brock situation, or are we going to have like a completely different character? Like that's the Lethal Protector, which they even made a joke about that in No Way Home about like, oh, I thought Lethal Protector was a stupid name. So I'm wondering, could that be? I think that'd be really interesting since we have like Flash out to some extent, knowing he has some issues. I mean, he's a big fan of Spider-Man, so to have him become Venom, I think would actually be pretty dope. The fact is that could be an interesting and complicated thing, especially because, well, he doesn't know Peter, but like just from a Spider-Man fanboy standpoint, I think that'd be so interesting. He's like, because he could end up becoming, Venom and be like, oh, Spider-Man, look, I'm just like you, and there could be major consequences for it. And like the fact is that Peter could end up taking Flash under his wing and like, right, I'll show you how to do this whole superhero thing. I have a lot more experience than you, which Peter, once again, personally could have conflicted feelings about it, because it's like, well, you were kind of my bully, you're kind of a douchebag, Flash, but all right, I'll help you out, because maybe becoming the Lethal Protector in this universe would, change him for the better. But I'm also curious too, like, well, could we throw it out there that there's no Oscorp, but I was also wondering, like, could it be a Harry situation? Because that is something they're doing in the Spider-Man video game for the PS4, well, not PS5, but still, that Marvel Spider-Man game, like, spoilers, they set it up so that Harry currently has the symbiote, so not unless they're doing something similar to that. Another thought that crossed my head is, what if it's Ned? Now, that would be the ultimate 1-2 punch, because like, whereas the Flash thing is like, whatever, I'll help you, but it's like, no, this is Ned. Ned doesn't remember you, but you remember him. It's like, he's your best bud. He was your man in the chair, like, So, like, it'd be a complicated thing, especially because, once again, Ned doesn't know anything about Peter. It's like, oh, Spider-Man, that's cool and everything, but it's like, he doesn't have that personal connection and, like, knowing that Spider-Man's his best bud, because their entire friendship doesn't exist. So, and that's going to be a complicated thing, too, of like, yeah, like, I know all this stuff about us as friends, but you don't remember any of it. Because I know this thing that certain people have kind of drawn parallels to about, like, I don't, like, Ned's character doesn't fully exist in the comics. He's actually based off of Miles' friend, I'm blanking, Genki. That's who Ned's kind of based off of, but like I keep seeing people draw parallels between Hobgoblin and Ned, so I don't know if like what his character could be typically ends up being the Hobgoblin, whatever the case. I don't remember the Hobgoblin storyline. I remember the character itself from the animated series from the 90s, but I'm not well versed enough in comic book lore to know like what that means. But I'll talk about it well, since we're on the subject, and Ned, I'll talk about it then, because like I said, they set up the whole thing of him being like, oh, don't worry, Peter, I will never like become your arch nemesis and try to kill you. And I think that's the irony behind it, that eventually he will, whether that is in the form of a Venom situation or whether that's in the form of a Hobgoblin situation. Once again, it doesn't have that personal connection of knowing like, right, we're not best friends, so that doesn't hold up as much. And I think it's going to hurt Peter that much more, because it's like, right, we're going to circle back to that. That line is so powerful, it's meant for a joke, but I think it's going to come back in a heartbreaking way. I think that's just potentially how they could set that up to do that. Obviously, another part of this conversation is, well, what are we going to do villain-wise? I personally would love a Kraven the Hunter situation. I've been kind of wanting a Kraven the Hunter situation live action wise for a while now, just because of that dynamic of being hunted. Like, to me, I think would make a pretty dope story. Once again, I always thought it was interesting, like, I don't remember where I heard this, but I think I've talked about this in the past, where I remember someone suggesting making it so that Kraven's from Wakanda. I thought that'd be pretty interesting, but I'm curious, like, would people have it? I mean, because it's not Tony Stark related, but making it so intertwined with it, I think it's fine. Like, I know people have their like issues with like the Iron Man Jr. thing. That's a whole conversation in itself. Like, I never hit that issue, but I know quite a few people have had that issue about that. But I'm wondering if making Kraven from Wakanda, would that be the same thing? I don't think it would be, but I think it'd be interesting. I am curious though. I know there was a whole Aaron Taylor Johnson situation of like, right, he was cast as Kraven for the solo movie. So I don't know if that's still happening at the time of me recording this or not, but I love a Kraven. I don't know if you necessarily do that the first movie, but maybe the second movie. To be fair, like, that once again comes down to how we handle this whole Spider-Man situation, because it's like, right, Mysterio's message at the end probably still stands. It's like, hey, I was killed by Spider-Man, just not the whole aspect of Peter Parker's the one that is actually Spider-Man. It's probably just like, oh, Spider-Man killed me. Which could tie in nicely with a Kraven being like, oh, you're the ultimate predator and stuff like that. You're the ultimate prey for me to come after and stuff like that. Like, oh, I can't wait to like hunt you. Like, that storyline would be pretty dope. And since we're also talking about the Mysterio thing, well, for one, it seems like we're solidifying, like, now Mysterio's straight up dead, so no Mysterio, not unless someone else picks up the mantle type of thing. But an angle about that I'm curious about is, and it's something I brought up during my review, Matt was able to help the Peter Parker situation, kind of sweep that away, but that's the thing. He helped out Peter Parker. He didn't help out Spider-Man. That was helping out Peter Parker, helped out the Spider-Man thing, but I don't think that's applicable. I think erasing everyone's memories about Peter Parker being Spider-Man doesn't help with the Spider-Man thing. So, like, I think we could still, once again, probably like the next time we see Matt Murdock will probably be in She-Hulk, so we'll probably get some insight into like, oh man, like, I love how you handled that whole Spider-Man thing. So if we get a line like that, then everything's copacetic and it's kind of been dealt with. But if not, we'll be dealing with the ramifications of at the end of it. I mean, obviously, like, more Jameson just being, oh, he's this super bad guy, maybe we still get some more Mysterio was right type of thing. I don't know. I'm curious to see, like, a definitive, like, because they still left that up in the air to a certain extent, because we still don't know the full ramifications of no one remembering Peter Parker but remembering Spider-Man, and how much of that carries over with them still remembering Spider-Man and no Peter Parker. We'll probably have to wait till later movies to really clarify the full scope of that. A topic I've heard some people throw out there too is a new love interest situation, and I've heard Black Cat thrown out. I'm like, yes, that'd be pretty dope, especially because that would create some complications with the whole MJ thing, because it's like, right, he's in love with MJ, he remembers their relationship, she doesn't, so that's going to be the complicated thing of like, right, here's this new person in your life, and especially because like the back and forth Black Cat and Spider-Man have always had, because I'm curious, like, how do you go about that, especially because like he's not Peter Parker, because like he has to reinvent Peter Parker, because it's like, right, no one it technically exists anymore. So I'm curious, like, is it going to be like he meets her as Felicia first, or does he meet her as Black Cat first, and then they get to know each other? Like, I'm curious. I would love to know how that dynamic would play out. Like, would it be a Spider-Man and Black Cat thing first, then Felicia and Peter, or would it be like Peter meets Black Cat, then Felicia? I'd be so curious to see how they handle that. But also, like, if MJ ends up remembering Peter, how complicated that would be, and that kind of put a little bit of a love triangle thing kind of going on, because MJ loves Peter for every part of him, Spider-Man and Peter Parker, maybe Black Cat only loves the Spider-Man things because maybe she never finds out who he is underneath, or maybe she does, I don't know. Now this next point is going to lead to a little bit of a spoiler for a TV show. So if you've ever seen the TV show Legacies, I don't know how to kind of work around this. It's been a few seasons, so I think I can go ahead and just talk about it openly. But the MJ and Ned thing makes me wonder, like, when they find out what Peter did, not telling them the truth, when the truth eventually comes out, because I think it will. Now, whether that's going to be in the first movie, the second movie, or it's going to be at the end of the arc, who knows? But they're going to be pissed at him, just like the whole Hope situation when everyone found out, like, in particular when Landon found out, like, wait, you were back this entire time and you never let me know who you were and what you meant to me? Like, why would you do that? So it's going to be that thing, especially for MJ. It's like, no, like, she made a whole point. It's like, if you're going to do something crazy, like, let us be a part of the conversation. Like, we made a point to be like, yo, you better find us, or if I find out the truth, that afterwards I'm going to figure it out all again and I'm going to kick your ass for not letting me know. She's going to kick his ass. I'm curious too, like, how much of an effect of not having Peter in their lives have shifted their characters, because I actually think this is really neat, and I never really thought about it at the time when I was watching the movie, but someone else had pointed it out, that if you notice, well, Ned and MJ still have a pretty tight relationship. Even without Peter, they probably won't remember, like, how did we become friends? Like, there was no, like, direct connect here, and now I'll probably start chipping away at the spell a little bit. But I'm curious, like, how different their characters are. Like, from that little scene we saw, it seems like they're the same, but we never know on the grander scale of, like, how different Ned and MJ might be. MJ might be the same, but we never know, like, for, like, who is Ned friends with? Ned might not have any friends. In fact, because Peter might have been his, like, Peter and MJ might have been his only friends, and so eventually it might be the thing of, like, without Peter around to help him out or be a buffer zone before he became friends with MJ, maybe Ned, like, got a little darkness in him. Maybe he's kind of a little angry at the world a little bit. Maybe, maybe not. I think that could definitely lean nicely into sprinkling in towards the whole potential villain angle if they decided to go down that route. Like, for example, like, what if in this, like, without Peter around, he actually becomes good friends with Flash, and Ned kind of becomes a little bit of a tool, especially considering MJ and him end up in MIT, so they're definitely going to run into Flash because he also got in as well. So, and speaking of those connections, like, what is his relationship like with the rest of the Avengers? Once again, they remember Spider-Man but not Peter Parker, because I think that is an important thing, because it humanizes, like, him as, like, oh, like, you're this person we've gotten to know, because it will probably disarm other Avengers. Like, right, we don't know who you are under that mask, especially if people start deep diving into, like, Peter Parker, you don't exist. Like, this might seem like some suspicious stuff, but, like, people probably won't be so trusting of him because they don't have that human connection of, like, oh, you're some teen, like, finding out, oh, you're some kid. They've already gone through that. They just recognize him as Peter Parker. It's, you know, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see, like, how a lot of these relationships and these dynamics change, because Peter knows these people well. They just don't know him at all. Now they know Spider-Man, and like I said, I think there's going to be a little bit of a disconnect there. So it's going to be interesting to see any future interactions with some of the Avengers and how they treat him. Will they be a little detached, a little colder towards him because they don't know the man, or rather boy, underneath the mask? Obviously, the big conversation too is, what are we going to do with the whole Miles Morales thing? Obviously, you had Electro make a joke about, like, he thought Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man was going to be black. So, but the question is, like, well, how are you going to do a Miles Morales thing? Are you going to do oh, he's from another universe, kind of like the whole whereas, like, in Spider-Verse, we went to his universe. Is he going to come to this universe from a different universe already established? Or are we going to, like, birth him in this world? I figure we might as well birth him in this world, like, because I think it was an interesting conversation that Heroes Reforged had. I think it was, like, Hector that said, like, he didn't want everything Spider-Man related to be multiverse. I mean, especially considering, like, we've already set up the whole situation of Donald Glover, Miles' uncle, already exists in continuity. We haven't touched that since Homecoming, but that still could be something like, all right, we play with that a little bit and, you know, develop a Miles situation, because that could definitely play into, like, what I brought up before about a Lethal Protector thing. Like, we could have that and maybe a Miles thing simultaneously. Like, maybe not the same movie, but, like, this could be a situation where, like, hey, Peter had the other Peters tutor him and kind of be there and support him. So, like, maybe he's kind of passing that torch on to maybe a Lethal Protector or a Miles Morales. Other things to consider too is we still have Vulture and we have Scorpion. Now, what changes the dynamic though is that Vulture no longer remembers that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, so there's that angle of like, right, because it's like we never did anything with that, because Scorpion's like, oh, do you know who he is? And he kept that from him. So now how does this change their dynamic going forward? Because I mean, I guess he's going to be a lot more vicious towards him, because it's like, right, I don't know, you're a kidding. I mean, he went ham on him in Homecoming anyway, but now like there's even bigger disconnection, like I brought up with the Avengers, but obviously on a more evil villain plot point of like, right, I'm going to take you down. But to be fair, Peter remembers everything about him, so he knows how to connect to him. It's like, right, everything I did with those multiverse of villains, I can do the same thing in this case. And speaking of, like, since we are setting up like a Vulture, a Scorpion, I mean, you know, we've already set up like who is going to be the Shocker and stuff like that. Some other names I heard were like Hammerhead, Tombstone would be pretty dope, like Spider-Man. God, I should have brought this up earlier, but like other Spider-Man villains I would like to see. A question I'd actually asked before too was, well, what is Peter actually going to do for work? Obviously, the Daily Bugle exists in this continuity, except like Jameson doesn't work for him. Like I said, if I remember, I think I brought it up during my review. I think there is clarification that he was fired because, like, once again, he's on that quote-unquote Alex Jones stuff, and he's kind of like seen as kind of super fringe, and so like they fired him. Granted, he's building his own name up again because of all this Spider-Man hate, because you see like he goes from like, oh, I got a green screen in my basement to actually having a full-blown studio and people working for me type of thing. So he kind of goes from like podcaster to full-blown televised news person. I think it would be interesting if he somehow ended up interning for Jameson. Not that like he necessarily did it on purpose, but maybe he signed up for a job and didn't realize it was connected to Jameson. And speaking of, like, since I brought up he is fired from the Daily Bugle, now this might put him in a position, because it's like, right, because social media and numbers and clicks means a lot news-wise now, so they'd be like, well, we might as well hire that whack job back. He gets the numbers, so that might be a little commentary on news and stuff like that. I mean, he was like the main news source you saw throughout No Way Home anyway. Like I said, it could just be like a Peter working for the Daily Bugle in general, because there could always be a possibility that it's Robbie, right, that works at the Daily Bugle, that worked alongside Jameson. I want to say it was Robbie. I could be misremembering. Or like I said, maybe it's a thing of like plot point wise, he has to work with Jameson just for the purposes of like, well, it's also the thing of like, well, he's anti-Spider-Man, I can't take advantage of this. And he's like, yeah, Spider-Man, he's the worst, sir. Yeah, I'll get these pictures for you. Like, oh man, I hate Spider-Man. Oh, he sucks. He's terrible. He's a villain. Or maybe it's going to be like, or, you know, maybe Spider-Man's not as bad as you think he is, sir. Like, I'm curious to see how they would potentially handle it, if that's the route they go. Something I thought was really interesting in the movie is the fact is that it hints that there are no Osborns, because Norman said, like, he looked up and is like, oh, there's no Oscorp. He's like, oh, my son doesn't exist in this world. I guess kind of implying like he doesn't either. Now the question, because that in my mind made me go like, because the big question was, who bought Avengers Towers? Now some people were suggesting like, oh, maybe a Norman Osborn, a Baxter building type of situation. Well, since they said no Osborns, I took that as like, oh, we're setting up a Fantastic Four thing with that. But I can't remember who it was. I want to say it might have been Heroes and Forge. I watched a lot of reviews just because I'm curious to hear from other people who are more well-versed in comics about this stuff, because it's Spider-Man. I'm going to go hard in the paint about Spider-Man. The fact is that someone had suggested, like, right, this might be a Tony Stark thing, which once again, people have their issues with, but this might be a little different because, yeah, Tony monopolized that space so that someone's like, yeah, I used to work for Stark Industries, and I was like, now that Tony Stark is gone, I can finally rise up. So we might get the Osborns that way, like we were sheltered and pushed down before. Kind of similar to how Otto is the way he is in the PS4 Spider-Man game. Maybe something similar to that, like, right, you're out of the way and now I can rise up, even though I was kind of a lowly grunt, now I get to work my way up. Not unless they do something like that with an Otto situation, or like do like a Spider-Verse thing and make it a Lily as someone kind of threw out there as well. Was his daughter named Lily? I believe it was. I could be wrong. Obviously, a really big question I have too is, this can't be the only crossover we get. We need one more crossover, a massive one, with the return of Toby and Andrew. Like, hopefully this isn't the only time we get this. It might be, because, you know, this might be that once in a generation type of thing. But if you add in maybe a potential future Miles Morales, like I said, a lethal protector, you add in Toby, you add in Andrew, maybe even throw in some Spider-Verse stuff too, like a Spider-Gwen. Or something of that nature. I think that'd be interesting. What, speaking of love interest, would they do the Gwen thing? Especially considering, like, Peter met Andrew, who's like, yeah, I lost my Gwen. I should also note, I've never seen the Gwen Stacy death scene until recently, because, like, someone was showing a clip of it during one of the reviews. I was like, oh shit, I've never seen that before, because the scene, because I knew it was coming, because I read about Gwen Stacy's death and how brutal that is. Live action wise, I saw it for the first time like recently, because I looked away from it when I originally watched The Amazing Spider-Man 2, because I also like, I'm a big Emma Stone fan, so I was like, I don't want to see that. And having seen it for the first time, I was like, Jesus Christ, that just kind of bummed me out. So I was like, if we introduce a Gwen Stacy, I hope we're not setting her up to just be we're introducing you just to kill you type of thing, you know. So, but I also think Peter would probably stay away from that, be like, oh, that's weird, because I know how Gwen's story plays out in another universe, like, you know. But regardless, like I said, I'd love another get together. I'd actually referenced this when it came to the trailer for Across the Spider-Verse Part 1. I referenced the Spider-Man episode, or rather that arc with Madam Web, where we got all these different Spider-Man. I think one of them was Ben Reilly. I want to say one of them's like, oh yeah, the Silver Suit Spider-Man, who's like, yeah, I don't have any powers, but I'm filthy rich. Then there's the one that's basically in the process of becoming Man Spider, one who has like Dr. Otto Octavius' like arms and stuff. I could definitely see something like that happening, because I vaguely feel like I remember them setting up that they were going to make a Madam Web movie. I don't know if that's still happening, but like potentially with this multiverse stuff, depending on how this all plays out, because this could culminate in like a Kang related thing, depending on how they play that whole thing out. But once again, just depending on how much they plan on stretching the multiverse stuff, especially like just MCU in general, but also Spider-Man related, then I could definitely see that being like a final arc type of thing. Which, speaking of final arcs, especially if you're doing a Miles Morales type of thing, this could be like just for the impact of like we followed this Tom Holland Spider-Man since Captain America Civil War. We've been here for the bumps, the bruises, the laughs, the tears, the joy, all of that, to the point of not existing anymore on a personal level, because Peter Parker doesn't exist anymore, to potentially in a new arc dying, just because, like, you know, very much like the Spider-Verse thing of like, right, he dies so that Miles could step up and fill that role. So that could potentially be something they do, maybe not, because obviously where the MCU is currently, it's about passing the torch all across the board, whether it's Sam being full-blown Captain America, whether it's even though the torch hasn't been fully passed yet, there's the whole Clint and Kate Bishop situation. Obviously they're setting up the Hulk and She-Hulk, so stuff like that has to be considered as well if he ends up if they decide to kind of like to make it hit again like the Aunt May death did. This would hit even harder, being like, yo, this is like Iron Man, but on another level. Well, almost, you know, I'm curious how people would feel about that, because they would be like, there's an Iron Man comparison of like, oh, like we already did this with Iron Man, now you're just doing it with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Maybe someone made the argument it cheapened it, you know, there's that argument. But to be fair, to also be faithful to the comics, because in the universe, the Ultimate Universe that Miles comes from, Peter dies in that. Fairly young, I might add. I think he was like 16 when he died. I was so stupid, I just thought about it too, like another villain. Because the reason why it didn't cross my mind is because of Hawkeye, and we're going to be entering a little Hawkeye spoilers, is the whole Wilson Fisk thing. Now, we can get some Fisk and Spider-Man, hell yes. Because I've talked about it before. Like, my first experience with Wilson Fisk is as a Spider-Man villain, not even through Daredevil. Not even the TV show, not even the Ben Affleck movie where it was Michael Clark Duncan. But just the animated series. I say that because, like, you know, spoilers, it seems like Echo might have killed him, which even I was like, did they bring him back to kill him? But other people are like, nah, there's no way. Like, apparently that actually plays into the comics very directly, that kind of not a one-for-one, but that very like storyline playing out that way. And it's like, no, Fisk isn't dead. So especially with how much people love Vincent D'Onofrio's Fisk, myself included, and you know, finally have him just to like kind of cut him off at the pass just when he makes his first full-blown appearance in the MCU, just to cut that off, especially when you in the same, well, a couple days after it's revealed to the world, hey, Matt Murdock's in the MCU to bring Fisk in fully just to kill him that very episode, you know. So, and also speaking of team-ups, I would love a Daredevil and Peter situation, or even like a Peter and Deadpool thing, just because like there was an episode of Ultimate Spider-Man the animated series where like Deadpool and Peter like join forces, and yes, it's not as buck wild and like R-rated like the movie is, but I think they still get across how weird and how crazy Deadpool is, and I think that'd be a nice combination. But I'd be so interested, like, especially with them setting up Spider-Man to be a much more street-level hero, it would make sense to kind of team up with Daredevil. Because that's one of my first memories, too, of, like, the animated series is, like, him teaming up with Daredevil. So, especially if, like, there's still legal issues going forward, like, them crossing paths in a superhero fashion would definitely be interesting. Because you'd also have to ask the question, what are they going to do suit-wise? Is it going to be Matt's suit from the Netflix shows, or are they going to modify it a bit? You know, to be like, this isn't a one-for-one from the Matt, you know, like, that was a variant. Obviously, these are just some of the thoughts going through my mind. I'd love to get to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you agree with anything I brought up? Do you completely disagree? What are your thoughts about? I know I talked about a lot in this. Once again, I go hard in the paint about Spider-Man. It's my favorite superhero, especially with the culmination of just what No Way Home was, and just I've talked about it too, like Spider-Man 1 with the Sam Raimi ones was my first superhero movie in theaters, at least to my recollection. I remember watching it in elementary school. Tangents and all that aside, like I said, just let me know your thoughts. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.